everyone. Welcome to another Quran study. God willing, today we will be reading from Surah 10, verse 54. Let's all seek refuge in God from sin rejected. I was Bismillah. Already said it. Huh? You can't hear me? No. I can hear myself. No, you should be able to hear me. Okay. Let me just double check before. Yeah, my mic is going. Check on YouTube maybe. Alright. So, welcome to another Quran study. We're reading from Surah 10, verse 54. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And what price faith? If any wicked soul possessed everything on earth, it would readily offer it as ransom. They will be ridden with remorse when they see the retribution. They will be judged equitably, without the least injustice. Absolutely, to God belongs everything in the heavens and the earth. Absolutely, God's promise is truth, but most of them do not know. He controls life and death, and to him you will be returned. O people, enlightenment has come to you herein from your Lord, and healing for anything that troubles your hearts, and guidance and mercy for the believers. So these verses, beautifully put into perspective what it means to have faith in God, and what it means to have belief in submission to God alone. Being a submitter, how valuable it is, what a blessing it is from God. If you were to put a price on it, you couldn't, because God says, even if, even if someone could purchase it on the day of judgment, people here in this world like to think they can buy everything with money, right? And so God has given an example, like how expensive it would be. It was impossible for them to buy it, even if they owned the entire planet Earth, and even twice as much. They would still not, they would still readily give it up, So imagine if you owned the whole planet Earth, right? Just try to imagine. It's hard to imagine, even your mind with all the billions and billions. But imagine if you owned all the wealth in the world and more, and you own the entire planet, and then you owned another planet. You had two planets, and you'd be ready to give that up just so you could, save yourself from going to hell, right? So that's how, what a treasure it is for us from God to have this blessing. The greatest gift that God, could give to anybody is guidance. And what that details, what that entails, is that everything belongs to God. Part of having that faith is knowing God, and knowing his qualities, and knowing that everything in the heavens and the earth belongs to God, and that God's promise about the hereafter is the truth, and that he controls life and death, and we're returning to God. And then really like verse 57, where God is telling us that this book has, comes with the healing for anything that troubles your hearts, and guidance and mercy for the believers. MashaAllah. So anything that troubles people's hearts, anything like grief and fear and anxiety and worry, all those types of things, the Quran provides the healing for everything, right? The healing for not just for the soul, but for the mind, the body, and the soul, all three. And so anything that troubles your hearts, anything that troubles your minds, God provides healing for that with this book and guidance for us. And God calls it mercy for the believers. This message is a mercy for the believers, joy for the believers. Say, with God's grace and with His mercy, they shall rejoice. This is far better than any wealth they can accumulate. So, again, this is referring to the perfect happiness that God has promised for the believers now in this world and in the hereafter. And God says that the believers shall rejoice in God's grace and His mercy. And this is far better than any wealth you can ever accumulate. Any wealth that you can accumulate is not going to give you, happiness, true happiness. That is a quality of the soul that comes from growing your soul, nourishing your soul. That God says this is far better than any wealth they can accumulate. How people are running like crazy after money and, trying to get as much money as possible. But God says this is far better than any wealth that they can accumulate. So we must remember that, and we set our priorities accordingly. Verse 59, human-made dietary prohibitions. Say, did you note how God sends down to you all kinds of provisions? Then you render some of them unlawful and some lawful. Say, did God give you permission to do this? Or do you fabricate lies and attribute them to God? Does it ever occur to those who fabricate lies about God that they will have to face Him on the day of resurrection? Certainly God showers the people with His grace, but most of them are unappreciative. So the thing here to take note of is how lightly people take the people take the idea of things that they make up about religion, lies attribute to God. When you prohibit something that God didn't prohibit, especially when it comes to His provisions, people take it very lightly, and I guess it gives them, their jinns and their ego, a certain boost or something that encourages them to make up stuff like that. They think they're clever, or they figured something out that nobody else could figure out, and that's a way for them to get some kind of prominence and popularity. But in reality, they're worshiping Satan, and this allows them to follow Satan and to attribute lies to God, to make Him a god beside God. Obviously, the devil is the other alternative. So even though you might be idolizing someone who made up a prohibition or a law, or making something lawful when it's not, and so people think that it's no big deal, and like, something needs to be said here about circumcision. I know we keep talking about it, but I think I realized that people who justify this satanic ritual as a commandment from God, or say that you can't prohibit it, don't realize that there are two sides to the coin too. Like, God is not just talking about making things unlawful that are lawful, because they're saying, oh, you're saying this is haram and this is not haram. Nowhere says it's haram. But it's also the other way. If something is from Satan, something is a satanic innovation, it's naturally prohibited. And if you're saying it's lawful, you're attributing a lie to God knowingly. And so this is a huge crime. And God says, and so this is why it's very serious. You know, people will say to you, like, oh, it's such a little thing. Like, why do you have to make such a big deal out of it? Because you're attributing lies to God. Attributing lies to God is a big deal. I mean, how is it different from other people who attributed lies to God? I mean, did they have to make a whole bunch of lies for it to qualify as a lie? No, you just have to make one lie. And you're attributing lies to God, right? I mean, that's it. And God says, who are more evil than people who do that? And we know that this is a pattern also, by the way. You know, it's not like someone just attributes one lie and then stops there. No, they attribute a bunch of lies. You know, it's just something that becomes apparent maybe in one point when you see someone. But these are naturally, God says, these are wicked people. If you get to know them, if you get to know what they stand for, a lot of it is, you know, truth, you know, will start to become more and more evident to us, you know. But you can tell by just one lie, right? You don't need a whole lot. Knowing God, verse 61. You do not get into any situation, nor do you recite any Quran, nor do you do anything without us being witnesses thereof, as you do it. Not even an atom's weight is out of your Lord's control, be it in the heavens or the earth. Nor is there anything smaller than an atom or larger that is not recorded in a profound record. So knowing God is understanding that God is omnipotent, that God is omniscient, that God is omnipresent when it comes to his knowledge, and understanding and acknowledging and believing that not even an atom's weight is out of God's control. So that's how absolute control God has, that he controls every single atom or something even smaller. You know, God is in complete control of everything, right? So where does that put us when we have fear over little things around us? You know, if you truly believe that God is controlling every single atom in the universe, should there be a reason for you to ever be afraid of anything, of anyone, other than God? Absolutely not. I mean, I think that's why the utmost submitter should, God says that they're fearless, the believers, they're fearless, because they understand that God is controlling everything, right? And so nobody has even a tiny bit of control to harm us in any way. You know, these are just, we see them doing things, we see them running, doing stuff, you know, being in charge, whether it's the president or your boss or anyone that you think might have some say over your provisions. Nobody does. And nobody can control anything. I mean, this is how Abraham was protected, right? Because Abraham was a submitter to God alone, a monotheist submitter who trusted in God. So God showed this example to us, right? And our faith should be strengthened the same way, because we have a mathematically proven scripture that shows that God is in absolute control over everything, that even if someone is going to throw you in the fire, that, you know, obviously you don't want to put your finger in the fire, you don't want to jump in the fire thinking that God is going to save you. But say if against your will someone else decides to harm you in this way, if it's God's will to protect you, he will protect you, you know. But you have to have that level of faith and that level of trust in God, knowing that God is your protector and that he is in full control of everything. And that is essential to knowing God, you know, to believing in God. You know, now we know, for example, from the messenger of the covenant, from the writings of, you know, a lot of the Jewish rabbis, that many of them don't even understand that. They think that God cannot control certain aspects of people's lives. And the messenger, you know, talked about that, which is very blasphemous, of course, you know, but so misleading at the same time and so far from the truth. When God is telling us that He controls even something as smaller than an atom, you know, that He knows everything about it. I mean, what kind of omnipotence and what kind of intelligence are we talking about? For example, you know, people get excited about artificial intelligence or super intelligence, you know, or general intelligence. I mean, all these different things, you know. But imagine, you know, like what sort of intelligence this is that God has, that He doesn't, not only does He know everything about you, but about every single atom in the universe and beyond, and not just now, all the way to the past and all the way to the future, right? This is God. And so that's why we worship God alone. That's why there's no one else comparable to God or worthy of any credit whatsoever. Happiness now and forever, verse 62. God says, absolutely, God's allies have nothing to fear, nor will they grieve. There are those who believe and lead a righteous life. For them, joy and happiness in this world, as well as in the hereafter. This is God's unchangeable law, such as the greatest triumph. Do not be saddened by their utterances. All power belongs to God. He is the hearer, the omniscient. Absolutely, to God belongs everyone in the heavens and everyone on earth. Those who set up idols beside God are really following nothing. They think that they're following something. They only guess. He's the one who rendered the night for your rest and rendered the day lighted. These are proofs for people who can hear. So praise be to God. I mean, this is something that should assure our hearts that God promises for the believers. You know, so God promises happiness now and forever. God says, absolutely, God's allies have nothing to fear, nor will they grieve. So why should you fear or grieve if you are submitting to God and you know that you are on the side of God, and God promises that He's with those who are on His side? God promises perfect happiness, as it says, now and forever. Joy and happiness in this world as well as in the hereafter. We don't have to wait till we get old and until we can no longer survive and we die. And then we see the works of our, the rewards of our works. No, I mean, God is telling us that your happiness starts here. Once your admissions tests are done, God willing, your happiness begins here. You know, obviously, as soon as you start to submit, you know, God says you will start to see, you know, the rewards, right? But that doesn't take away from the fact that you still have to be tested, you know, through ups and downs in life, and good things and bad things, and lack of health or wealth or the abundance of it. You know, we still have to be tested to see, you know, what are we really seeking? You know, if we're really seeking God, then none of this should even matter. Like, we don't care about these other things. That's not the reason, in other words, why we are going to believe in God and why we're going to worship God. You know, some people make it their goal that they want things, right? Like someone might say, oh, I want to be rich, or I want to be, or at least I want to be wealthy in some way. So I'll just worship God alone, so God will bless me more generously, and I will go do my prayers, you know. But those people sincerely worshiping God, or are they actually worshiping those things that come with it? right? We shouldn't be one of those people. We should worship God not because of the rewards that we get, but we worship God because He is the Lord of the universe. He is the only one worthy of being worshipped, and He created us for that reason. And this is how we nourish our souls, by worshiping Him. It gives us joy and it gives us happiness as a consequence, a good a side effect, as the messenger calls it. But that's not the reason why we choose to worship God alone. We choose to worship God alone because He is worthy of worship, and He's the only Lord and Master, and who controls everything. And as a bonus, you can say, God gives us with happiness and rewards because He's so kind and merciful. Because imagine if none of that was there, would you still worship God? Like, if you didn't have any reward for it, life just stayed stagnant, like forever, and would you still worship God knowing that He's the God of the heavens and the earth? A true believer should worship God under all circumstances, whether God is giving him things or not giving him things, whether he's going to get things or not. He knows that's the only way to be, is to worship God. That's how God has created us. And for anyone to not do that is unappreciative, because, God gave us things like our eyes, for example, our bodies, the blessings in this world. That alone, is enough for us to be thankful to Him, for us to worship Him until we die, right? And it's still not enough. We can't thank God enough for everything that He has given us, because He's the one who has given us everything. Imagine if someone gives you something small, a gift, let's say, you'd be very thankful to them, But what about God, who has given us everything that we have? Our bones, our flesh, our bodies, our spouses, or our families, everything, all provisions, up until now, all the things, God is the one who is giving them to us, So why should we not worship Him? And then God is telling us to not be saddened by the utterances of people, because all power belongs to God, If you are saddened by things that people say, that shows you're giving them power, It's natural to feel a little bit saddened and hurt sometimes by things, harsh things that people may say, But God says we shouldn't. For a submitter, nothing like that should really faze them, because God is the one who is in full control, and all power belongs to God. Everything that is happening around us is in accordance with God's will, So we shouldn't be objectors. Absolutely to God belongs, verse 66, absolutely to God belongs everyone in the heavens and everyone on earth. Those who set up idols beside God are really following nothing. They think that they're following something, they only guess, right? So, if you think that there's anything besides God that has some power, that is doing something, these people think that way. They idolize those things naturally, because they think they have some power. And they think that they're following something, like some logic they have, like some idea they have, that they think that this is how things work, this is what they have to do. And God says they only guess. And then it's verse 67. God says that He's the one who rendered the night for our rest and rendered the day lighted. And these are proofs for people who can hear. So God really created the night for our rest, and I'm laughing because it's almost midnight here. And midnight is the peak time when the melatonin in your body reaches its peak for you to get a deep rest, And from the hours of, let's say, like 9 to 10 p.m. it starts and lasts up to maybe about 2 a.m. and reaches its peak at about midnight. and and God says He has designed it for us to rest. I mean, He could have designed the world differently, right? But He created rest, and He designed the night, orchestrated it specifically so we can rest in it. And I actually recently gave a sermon about this too. Haven't had a chance to post it yet, but maybe God willing, I'll try to post it. But the thing is that God created the night for your rest, right? And we would be unappreciative if we didn't take advantage of His blessing. People decide to, pretend it's daytime. Turn on all the lights. Turn on their televisions or phones or computers and stay up all night and then sleep all day. And then obviously, that has, bad adverse effects on their mental health, on their physical health, on their metabolism, on their memory, and, causes so many problems, right? But God's design is the way He has created it. Imagine if you, got to sleep at the right time, at the night time that God has given you. You slept during that time. You would feel so much healthier, and you'd have so much energy, and your life, the quality of life, generally would improve by a lot, right? And this is just basic science that backs up all of this. There's tons of studies that have been carried out that support all of this. So God is the one who created it. He could have designed our lives in a way where we would never even need sleep, right? But it's a blessing from God that He allows us to recharge and reset our batteries every day. And obviously, not to mention the importance of the quality of sleep that you get during those hours between, let's say, 9 and 10 to like 2 or 3 a.m. is the best time for your body to recover from all kinds of things that harmful things that are created in your body, especially in your brain, that need to be flushed out, and part of your growth and development, cell repair and things like that. All of them have all of that. Actually, most of it will happen at night, and during these hours is the peak time for all of this to happen. If you slept during this time, your body would be that much more efficient, generally, right? If you don't have diseases and stuff like that, I mean, of course, that's different. But still, nothing replaces that time that God has created. You could sleep twice as much during the daytime, but you won't get the same quality of sleep that you would get if you slept at the night time that God says He has created for our rest. Of course, you can, if you want to meditate or things like that, I mean, you could always wake up after that time and carry out, meditation and things like that. Also, if you need to do things or get ready for your early day at work or whatever. But really, this is really a blessing from God, and you can read more about it and see how much benefits this offers for our well-being. And God has put this in the Quran 1400 years ago, obviously, which is still true to that day, backed by modern science. So God willing, I continue reading. Verse 68, the gross blasphemy. They said God has begotten a son. Be He glorified. He is the most rich. To Him belongs everything in the heavens and everything on earth. You have no proof to support such a blasphemy. Are you saying about God what you do not know? Proclaim, those who fabricate lies about God will never succeed. They get their temporary share in this world, then to us is their ultimate return. Then we commit them to severe retribution for their disbelieving. So as the subtitle says, it's a gross blasphemy. People who have committed who have uttered this blasphemy, cannot go to heaven if they die with this idea that God has a son. God does not have any partners. If you think that God needs any partners out of weakness or whatever, what is that? Why would God even want to do that? And and on top of that, they wouldn't. Yeah, it's just so wrong at so many levels. It it really, like, when God talks about, the earth is about to tear asunder and the mountains are about to crumble. This is how bad it is, what God says, right? And it is because how can you compare someone like God with the powers that he has? I mean, he and you compare that to a fallible human being like Jesus, saying that God needs him in some way to be his son or to be a partner in his kingship, that he has to, all those weird explanations that you hear all the time from these fanatic people, right? And it's just becoming more and more clear now, how misguided these people are. As much as they try to hide themselves under the garment of righteousness, fake righteousness, I would say. They're really being exposed. They've always been exposed, but I guess now things are becoming more clear for people who are well informed about the world around them. And God says that those who fabricate lies about God proclaim that they will never succeed. They may temporarily think that they have succeeded by perpetrating those lies and by spreading false information and having followers, but that's not a substitute of real success. God promises eternal happiness for the believers. And someone who doesn't get that means they're just going to be miserable. Their misery starts in this world and continues in the hereafter and never ends. So God says those who fabricate lies about God will never succeed. They have these few moments in this world where they can, enjoy the worldly materials, but then after that, the misery sets in, and eventually when they die, then, obviously we know that they will be in hell for sure. But God shows to us that, like he says, they get their temporary share in this world, then to us as their ultimate return, then we commit them to severe retribution for their disbelieving. And I was reminded of the story I was watching today on social media about this one couple. They were on social media, very popular, and then one of them, they also had a a Christian ministry he owned as a business. He had a bunch of business, and this was one of his business. A Christian ministry. He was telling people that he was sent on earth for a purpose, and to make impact in people's lives, and they were lying this whole time to people about so many things, and cheating on their spouses and stuff like that, and eventually, all of it was, later, apparent to people. But this is happening on a daily basis around us, right? People are claiming to be devout worshippers of God in some way, but they're idol worshippers, and they're not doing these things because they want to seek God really. Those who want to seek God really are going to find God. They're going to find the truth, and they'll become submitters. But the other ones, they're just seeking the temporary share in this world, whether it's, approval for their friends or family or neighbors or work or whatever else it is, But it's not God. If the priority is God, then God would show them the way. So God will continue reading Noah, verse 71. Recite for them the history of Noah. He said to his people, O my people, if you find my position and my reminding you of God's revelations too much for you, then I put my trust in God. You should get together with your leaders, agree on a final decision among yourselves, and let me know it without delay. If you turn away, then I have not asked you for any wage. My wage comes from God. I have been commanded to be a submitter. They rejected him, and consequently we saved him and those who joined him in the ark. We made them the inheritors, and we drowned those who rejected our revelations. Note the consequences, they have been warned. So this story of Noah is a lesson for us. The only reason why God has mentioned these stories is these lessons for us. I mean, these are not just stories. These are stories of reality of this world and things that actually happened, and God has mentioned them so that we can learn from them. This is history. You know, we have to learn from history, and this is why, you know, God has mentioned these examples for us. You know. So Noah put his trust in God, and he knew that for these people it was too much for them, that he's just reminding them of God. And he says, if you find my position and my reminding of God's revelations too much for you, then I put my trust in God. You should get together and agree on a final decision among yourselves and let me know. And eventually, obviously, they did. It was apparent to Noah that they didn't care, and they rejected him, as God says in verse 73. And consequently, we understand what happened with Noah. And what happened with Noah is no different from what will happen with other messengers, like Dr. Khalifa, for example. You know, in our case, the messenger of the covenant also explained how, you know, it would be the same. It is the same, actually. People who stand with the messenger, people who stand with the truth, people who stand with God are saved. And people who decide not to, people who are insincere, you know, they're going to end up going to the retribution, whether it's individual annihilation or community annihilation. We know the community annihilation is coming very quickly. Whether people believe it or not, it doesn't matter. It's not going to wait for people to believe before it comes. You know, the signs are already there. And so when that happens, you know, just like what happened with the people of Noah, right? The people who stand with him are going to be saved. The people who don't, they're going to get affected by it. They're going to get annihilated by it. And we know who's going to get annihilated specifically with this one. The people who decided to disbelieve, the Arabs. But Arabs are not the only ones who have rejected the truth, right? But the Arabs will be annihilated as a community because they have completely been dismissed from God's grace, and not a single Arab, as we know it, has decided to become a submitter, and so they're not guided, and that's why they're collectively going to get annihilated by it. But for others, you know, I mean, God has many different ways in which they get their retribution. You know, we see people dying of cancer all the time, and you know, you have other diseases around just spreading. I mean, we have so many different pandemics and stuff. You know, God knows what else is gonna come. And you know, you have all these things, right? But the bottom line is, if you stand with God, you know, Noah's example is there. You know, the whole neighborhood, you know, all around the local community of Noah, everybody drowned except the people who believed, you know. And that's what he told them. He said, if you turn away, I have not asked you for any wage. My wage comes from God. I have been commanded to be a submitter. So, Another important thing here to note is that God is teaching us that the messengers do not charge you any wage. They do not charge you a fee. So God's message, they don't charge you money to give you God's message. Yet there are people who are saying that the messenger said that there needs to be a download fee for downloading free Qurans, coming from like um, the coming from Rashad's son, who's a false messenger, of course. But there are people who are supporting him, unfortunately, um, knowing all these details and then pretending they don't know them. But anyways, so God's messenger doesn't charge you any wage, because that's his duty, his job. His wage comes from God, meaning he's not doing this for worldly things. Whether people come up with lies to say, no, messenger said this and that, don't believe it, because it says right here that the messengers do not charge for any wage, right? And so God's message should be available to people free of cost if it can be made available free of cost, which now, thanks to the electronic age, it's available for free, and it should be made available for free. And there should be no reason for people to want to charge for it, They should not think about the worldly material gain, the few dollars that you're going to get from each copy. I mean, what is that? Cheap material gain, right? You could be spreading God's message instead, and the money you spent could be used for a hereafter. I mean, how isn't that a better option? Humans insist on their original sin, verse 74. Then we sent after him messengers to their people, and they showed them clear proofs, but they were not to believe in what they had rejected in the past. We thus sealed the hearts of the transgressors. So this verse is actually pretty packed, but it's talking about our original sin that we committed when we failed to side with God. And so God says, but they were not to believe in what they had rejected in the past. So they failed to side with God's absolute authority before this coming to this world, and then they did the exact same thing. They failed to side with God. And God says he thus seals the hearts of the transgressors. They don't deserve the guidance. That's why the guidance doesn't come for these people, because God knows what's in their hearts. Moses and Aaron. Then we sent after them Moses and Aaron to Pharaoh and his group with our proofs. But they turned arrogant and were transgressing people. When the truth came to them from us, they said, this is obviously magic. Moses said, is this how you describe the truth when it comes to you? Is this magic? How can any magicians prevail? They said, did you come to divert us from what we found our parents doing and to attain positions of prominence for yourselves? We will never join you as believers. The truth prevails. Pharaoh said, bring to me every experienced magician. When the magicians came, Moses said to them, throw whatever you are going to throw. When they threw, Moses said, what you have produced is magic, and God will make it fail. God does not support the transgressor's work. God establishes the truth with his words, despite the criminals. None believed with Moses except a few of his people, while fearing the tyranny of Pharaoh and his elders. Surely Pharaoh was much too arrogant on earth and a real tyrant. Moses said, O my people, if you have really believed in God, then put your trust in him, if you are really submitters. So again, just like the example of Noah, we have the example of Moses and Aaron, and how God saved the believers. There were very few believers among them anyways. But there were some other people too that were allowed to be there for some time at least, to teach us also, how people can be after how people may behave, if they're not true submitters, they're hypocrites, how they will behave. And I mean, we see that in every community. And Moses and Aaron also, I mean, God says none believe except a few of them. And eventually those few were distinguished towards the end, when all the rest were left off to wander for 40 years aimlessly, as God says. But nevertheless, God says that the truth prevails. And we see from Pharaoh's story, I mean, how big of a tyrant he was, and how God allowed the truth to prevail. All the people were gathered, when Pharaoh thought that, he was going to prevail, and he gathered everything, put everything together, only for his own failure, for the message to just be heard by everybody, including all the magicians at one point, and see the truth. All was designed by God, right? But it looked like Pharaoh had planned it, but it was actually part of God's plan, and God allowed for the truth to prevail this way. But God says here that Pharaoh was a real tyrant, and people were afraid of him. He was very arrogant and ruthless. And there are many people in this world too that, if they have the kind of powers that were given to Pharaoh, that, and we can certainly see it, that they would do as bad as Pharaoh, if not worse. But some people may be even worse than Pharaoh. But God set it up as a lesson for us. And but we can see here what Moses said to his people. So if you have really believed in God, then put your trust in Him. If you are really submitters, imagine having a ruler who is a tyrant like Pharaoh, who was a real transgressor, God says, and these people were few in number, and they should naturally be afraid. But Moses told them to put their trust in God. And likewise, the odds may be against us, but in this world, or things may appear like we are at a disadvantage. But if you're a submitter, real submitter, you should put your complete trust in God alone. And this is the example that Moses is teaching his followers here too. And we can see how that trust plays out in the end, how God doesn't disappoint them as a result of the trust that they put in Him. So with this, God willing, I will end. Sorry I went over time a little bit. If you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free. Thank you. I think there's only me and John. John, do you have any questions or comments? All right, so I guess if there are no comments or questions, God willing, we can conclude. John, I think you have a comment. Are you saying something? No? Okay. So, all right, so yeah, I guess if there are no comments or questions, God willing, we can conclude our study. Thank you all for joining us. Our next English Quran study would be, our next, I didn't realize you guys couldn't hear me. That's crazy. Maybe, okay, you know what? I think, yeah, anyways, that's unfortunate. So, anyways, since you guys can't hear here and you're on YouTube, God willing, we can end the study. And God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Saturday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.